Good afternoon. We're going to cover the Form 7200, the advance payment of employer credit due to COVID-19. This is a payroll return. This is a payroll to get an advance credit from your quarterly 941. So in other words, I can file the Form 7200 anytime I want during the quarter. I can file it after each pay period. I can file it, for example, let's say this is the first time you've heard it, and we're in the middle of the first quarter of 2021. You can actually file this for if you have more tax credit, and today we're going to talk about the employer retention credit, that if your employer retention credit is greater than your deposits, then you can file this form and you will fax it in, and you will get, within the next week, 10 days, you will get a deposit in your account for the amount that the advance is greater than your deposits required. So the first thing I'm going to do here is look here on the camera. I want to put here that it's a Form 2021. I did a video about 10 months ago, and it was for the 7200 for 2020. So the thing about it is, first, it's an advance credit. It's called, so you're a qualified business, either by partial or completely shut down by a government entity, or your revenues are greater than 20% down. We've covered that in another video, but the important thing is, today I'm going to focus on the ERC, the Employee Retention Credit. So with that, I get asked, how many of these can I file? I've got clients who are filing one each pay period. If they're doing that weekly, they're filing one weekly. If I happen to skip a week, can I file 2 weeks? Absolutely. You can file this form for the advance credit all the way up to the end of the quarter. Then you're going to file the 941. You can actually file it, it's for qualified wages up to the end of the quarter, I should state. But you can file this 7200 up until the time you file your 941. What I want to do here today is to go through this form and give you some guidance on it. First thing, again, it's a 2021 form. If you look here under the Form 7200, I'm going to underline this on the camera here. It's revised January of 2021. Now, as we go to move down through this, what we're going to look at is how to fill the form out. And I might stop and say, if you're not familiar, for example, with the Form 7200, I did another video, and actually it was on the Form 7200, when you could use it. It was a Q&A video, and that plus you need to look at, I believe it was the top 10 ERC questions and answers. So there's two videos that I recommend you watch. One is how to qualify as a business and what is qualified wages. Second one is when you qualify for the Form 7200, and I cover about 12 items there about when you qualify and what you need to be aware of. But today, again, we're going to fill out the form. So let's start down the form. You're going to put in the company's name, so it's ABC LLC. And this is real important here, this employer ID number, because when you fax this form in, whenever we get to the end of the quarter, the IRS is going to match this employer ID number with the one on the 941 report. So as we go through this, you're going to put street address, 123 Avenue, whatever. And actually I drew that on the wrong line. Let's move that down if you have a trade name. So we're going to put address. We're going to put the city, the state. But then I want to go over here to the right. And over here, be sure and mark, in this case, we're filing for first quarter, 7200. So I'm going to mark the box 1 for January, February, and March. So then the IRS will take this federal ID number plus the quarter they're looking at. And then when you file the 941, they're going to take all the 7200s that you have filed during the quarter, and they're going to accumulate, and they will end up being on a line on your 941 report. Also remember, if you make an error on the 7200, you do not file an amended 7200. Again, to repeat, if you make an error on one of your 7200s, you do not correct it. This will cause this will for sure cause a delay whenever you're in the refund, and it also causes a delay in your quarterly report. So again, employer ID number, what quarter we're filing in. Then I'm going to stop right here, draw a little arrow that says the name of employment tax return, third-party preparer that will report the wages and the credit, and again, their ID number. So again, this form, very simple when we get to fill it out, but you've got to be sure and get the right employee ID numbers in the right places. In this case, it's a third party. There is a filing tip for filing the Form 7200, and you need to be sure and read that. But let's move on down to Part 1. In the original 2020, there was, I believe, 4 questions, and on the 2021, they've added a couple of questions. So let's look at Part 1. Tell us about your employment tax return. Part 1, line A, well, it's a 941. And remember, it's your 940 series. It can be a 941, 943, 944, or for railroad, a CT1. So it applies to, I will refer to all of our 94X series. Let's go to Part 1B. Is this business that started on or after January 1st of 2020? You must check one. And our answer in this case is no. It's been going on for quite some time. Now we move on down to Part 1, Item C. The amount reported on line 2 of your most recently filed 941 report. And you're going to put that dollar amount in here from your last filed 941 report. Moving on down to Item D, Part 1, the tax period most recently filed. In our situation, if we look back up here, we're doing this in the first quarter of 2021. So here, what we should do here is we're going to put quarter 4, 2020. Again, helping to direct which quarter of the 941 we're going to be talking about. Item E, Part 1. If you request an advance payment for the employee retention credit, that's what we're going to do today. Remember the employee retention credit for 2021 for each quarter of qualified wages per employee up to $10,000, we can get a 70% credit. So, and again, in our video on how to qualify for ERC and defining wages and stuff, we define qualified wages, which generally means the non-qualified or the ineligible wages is related parties. But in this case, we're going to assume all wages are qualified. In that light, we need to say, enter the average number of full-time employees. Are they FTEs? An interesting note is when you look at what an FTE, a full-time employee, how to calculate it, it actually goes back to Affordable Care Act that was passed in 2010, in case you want to see what that is. But really, you're just adding up the hours, and I'm giving you an approximation. Divide that through by 40. In our case, I'm going to say, just for this example, we have 4 FTEs, or 4 full-time equivalents. Now, Item F, Part 1 says if you're requesting advance payment for qualified sick leave and family leave, well, in 2021, that is for the first quarter. But in our case today, to make this straightforward, we're going to assume we have no employee qualifying for that. So now we've told them about our business in Part 1. Let's move now to what is the reason why we're filing this. Part 2, we want to figure out what our credit is. What we're going to do in this setup, I'm going to pick a pay period. In this case today, I'm going to pick January, right at the top, 19 or 15. So this is for a 2-week payroll on January 15th. And this is the first one we're filing. And with that, what we're going to look at again is what's our qualified wages. So Part 2, line 1, total employee retention credit. I'm going to underline that here for the quarter. Okay. Let's say that we had, if you had 10,000, you had one employee, 10,000 qualified wages, the employee retention credit would be 70% or 7,000. So the important thing to remember here on line 1, Part 2, is we're putting down the employee retention credit for the quarter. In my example, I've rounded some numbers. This is off of a live payroll, but we're using round numbers. We need to know what's our employee retention credit. What's 70% of qualified wages? So I'm going to say that is $5,000. Okay, line 2, qualified sick leave. Well, up here in part 1F, we put in a 0. So that means down here on part 2, they're asking wages, not people. Okay, so we're going to put in a 0 there. Line 3, qualified family leave wages. In this case, again, we're saying we have 0 from line F part 1. So line 3 part 2, we're going to enter another 0. Seems pretty straightforward. But stay with me, because I'm going to show you this pay period. Then we're going to go 2 weeks forward, and then I'm going to show you how the importance of for the quarter. So again, employee retention credit for the quarter is $5,000 because this is the first one we're filing. Line 4, add line 1, 2, and 3, or we have another $5,000. Now, line 5, we need some additional information here. Line 5, the total amount by which you have already reduced your federal employment tax deposit for these credits for this quarter. Okay, enter a positive number. Well, when we look at what our federal deposits were for this pay period, we're going to assume they were $3,500. So this is our payroll deposit, $3,500. That's for the quarter. Again, for the quarter, for this quarter. Line 6 says total advance credits requested previously filed on this form. This is our first 7,200. So on line 6, we're going to enter a 0. So then let's move on to line 7. Line 7 says add line 5 and 6. That'll be 3,500. And now we're getting to the point of why we're doing all this. We want to know what is our advanced request. So we subtract line 7 from line 4. And we, at that point in time, we have $1,500. So we've got $1,500. And what we're going to do is fill out the third-party designee, if it's a third party that's doing it, and fill out, be sure to put the appropriate name and phone number to contact. Then designated party that has the right to sign this form will sign here. If it's a paid preparer, then they're going to fill out that section. And then I'm going to highlight this. We're now ready to fax this in to this number right here. It's 855-248-0552. At this point in time, we fax it in, and we're now done with this pay period. So what I want to do is I want to slide this over, make sure I get this lined up where you can see it. And I want to get another form here. And what I want to do is now let's go 2 weeks forward, and we're going to look at, I think that would make us, again, this is a 2021 form, revised January 2021. And this here's for the pay period ending January 29. So we're going to go on down and do kind of the same thing. we're going to be sure and put in the employee ID number. We're going to mark this again. We're still in the first quarter. We're then going to look over here. We still got the same prior 941. Put that number in here. I need to mark in A 941. I need to mark this no. Last time we filed a report was fourth quarter of 2020. We still have 4 qualified employees. For what? We're looking here is that we're looking at the employee retention credit. We also said when we began this that we had no qualified sick leave or family leave wages in the January pay period. Now we're going to go to January 29th and we're going to say the same thing. Now, as I said a few minutes ago, this sounded really straightforward. And I remember whenever I was doing this the first time about 10 months ago, this is where I had to watch how I was accumulating my numbers. But in order to fill out part 2, we're going to start seeing in each one of these, like line 1, for the quarter. Okay? The rest of these, this quarter, down here, for this quarter. Okay? For this quarter. The reason why I underlined all of these, and maybe I need to highlight this, for the quarter. That might be better to see on the camera. For the quarter. That means a summation or an accumulation. And in checking errors with the IRS, right here is where there's a large error, and so there's some confusion. So I'm going to slow it down a little bit, try to put numbers together. But now we need to know, what did we pay, and I need to see my assumption. What did we pay in the January 29th period? Well, we got all of our wages were qualified, but 70% of the qualified wages is $7,000 for the pay period January 29th. Okay. The other thing we need to know, our deposit for the pay period was $4,000. And I'm gonna lay this pen right here to focus on the issue. And this one here is, if we look here, this is a January pay period of ending on the 29th. It's 2 weeks after our first pay period that we filed one on. If we did this like we did the first one, we just insert the numbers and go on. But because it's for the quarter, what I have to do is on line 1 here, it says total employee retention credit for the quarter. I've got to go back here and I've got to pick up the $5,000 from the last one, add the $7,000 to the second one, and line 1 now is going to be $12,000. So maybe I'll write it in here. Our first pay period was $5,000 plus $7,000 for the quarter. Line 2, we again, from part 1F, we know we have no qualified sick leave wages, no qualified family leave wages. So now we get to line 4 and we total lines 1, 2, and 3 for a total of $12,000. Okay. Now we're going to move on to line 5. And line 5 is the fact we need to know the total amount which we've already reduced your federal tax deposits for these credits for this quarter. Well, we got again what was in our last one. It was $3,500. So I'm going to write out here $3,500. Now, that was from this one, just like we did on line 1, but we're on line 5. So I take this $3,500 plus the $4,000 that I told you was our deposits for the second pay period, and I'm going to put plus $4,000. At that point in time, again, for this quarter, we've had required deposits of $7,500. Now let's go to line 6. Total advance credits requested on previously filed form for this quarter. Well, at this point in time, we've already filed $1,7,200. So we got to go back to our first filing. And what we're going to look down here is that we've already asked advance requests. So I'm going back to the last $7,200, and we got an advance request of $1,500. So I'm going to go over here and I'm going to put $1,500 in here because it's for this quarter. In this video, you're going to get tired of me saying for this quarter, but I can't say it enough because right here is where most of the errors are being made on the 7,200s. Let's go to line 7. Let's add line 5 and 6. When we add 5 and 6, we're going to get a total of $9,000. Because see, the $9,000 is the payroll deposit requirement for this quarter plus any advance requests we've made from any prior 7,200s. So it's the $3,500 plus the $1,500 that's going to come over here with the $4,000. So again, we're going to end up at $9,000. So we're back to what we want to get when we fax this in. Our advance request for this pay period on the 7,200 filed is now going to be $3,000. At that point in time, we're telling the IRS, quarter to date, through the quarter, we've made all of our deposits. We've included this $1,500 advance payment from a prior 7,200, but it's what we filed for this quarter. At that point in time, we're requesting $3,000, and we're going to again fax it to this number. So with that, what we do now, I've showed you how this accumulates. So we're just going, until we get to the end of the quarter, we're going to just keep filing, in this case, in this example, we're just going to keep filing 7,200s for qualified wages, 70% retention up to $7,000 credit per employee. So we just keep accumulating this. So I'm going to stack it on. They just keep stacking on. And then we get to the end of the quarter. A minute ago, I told you if you made an error on the 7200 that you don't amend it. You will reconcile it on the 941. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to reach over here, and this is a draft copy of the 2021 first quarter 941. So we're going to be filing the first quarter, and we're going to mark the box here for January, February, and March. But what I want to show you on it, because I'll be doing a 941 first quarter on a different video, but what I want to show you is where this ends up at. What's going to happen if we go to line 13F? Total advance received from filing forms 7200, there it is again, for the quarter. So what happens is that we take the accumulation of these, and again, here if you look down on the camera, so as these accumulate through the quarter, they keep stacking up. On the last pay period, when we file a form 7200, which can be filed anytime before we file the 941, we're going to take and we're going to put a number here. And then we're actually going on the 941 quarterly report, we're actually going to have actual wages, withholdings, etc. And this number will be subtracted from any credit available. And this is where, again, I said it will be reconciled on the 940. So then what I want to do, if I can find another 7200 here, then what happens? We get to that when we take this quarter, we put the accumulation on the 941, we are now done with all these 7200s. And in quarter two, we're now ready to start over. So my point is, we started a new quarter, and then each, like for example, line one here, total employee retention credit for the quarter, all right? But these are new numbers. And so we're only gonna have the numbers for the first pay period in this one, and then we'll start accumulating again to the second quarter. Now, just a couple of, this kind of, wraps it, but before I let you go, a couple of observations is the fact that if you'll notice, or right here, I'll put the pin down here, it's got January, February, and March, first quarter, it's got second quarter, third quarter, and fourth quarter. But wait a minute, the ERC payment right now goes through June 30th. We learned that in our ERC presentation. So why'd they put July through December, the third and fourth quarter? It's because if you actually read in the instruction, they said in case this credit might be extended again, then this 941 and the 7200 should work through the end of December of 2021. So kind of real quick, in recap, the 7200 is to get an advance payment on employee credits, and it may be for, it can be for the employee retention credit, which goes on line one, the qualified sick leave wages, and qualified family leave. For those three credits dealing with payroll, and again, this is a payroll credit, not an income tax credit, be sure and put the right ID numbers wherever they apply, the right quarter, there's another ID number, and this part one is asking you numbers. For example, it's asking you the number of employees here, but when we get to part two, they're asking you for dollars, and each line is for the quarter. I hope this helps. This kind of brings the conclusion. I want to thank you for attending. Please click like, hit the button, share. I think that's the most important thing, because every time I turn around, they say file a 7200, file a 7200, but I really haven't seen somebody just break it down to nuts and bolts of how to. Thank you, and see you in the next video.